Good evening, everybody. This is our last video that I'll be sending you for this semester, summer of 2020. We're in Module 4 for the next 2 weeks, and the main focus in this section primarily is on technology. You will notice that some of the questions that are asked about the future of technology in teaching may seem a little bit different than they would have last summer because so many of us have gone to teaching online and having meetings with our students online because of the virus. And so you can certainly comment on that and how it has changed for you on some of the entries that you guys will be submitting. I've noticed that some of you have been working ahead and have submitted assignments already for Module 4, and that's wonderful. I believe today I finished scoring all of the Module 2 assignments that have been submitted. And so if you believe that you had submitted an assignment that you've not received any feedback on, or a score for, please double check with me because we're coming to the close of the semester, and so it won't be long, and we'll be completing this class, and so I want to make sure everybody has made their submissions and that I have received them so that I can finish up the grading and scoring. I do want to remind you again to be sure to read the assignments in the modules very carefully, either under the assignments tabs or the module through the module site in Canvas. I also encourage you carefully to review the rubrics, looking at what kind of content we're looking for in your responses, as well as the formatting that we're looking for. So just take care to do that. In Module 3 assignment, you were to turn in a formerly prepared assignment or assessment, lesson plan or assessment for a class, and then revise that and turn in that copy as well with rubrics for both of those, the initial rubric and the second one, if it was an assignment. If it was a lesson plan, you could just give me the earlier one and then the one that you have coming up that you've revised. But if it was anything like an assessment or a lesson, or I'm sorry, an assignment, then you would need to include rubrics for both. The original and the revision. So be sure that you've done that. If you haven't, then you can do a resubmission because I'll probably take a couple of days to do some other readings because I am still working with other students on their dissertations, and I have drafts of those to read in different stages. So I'll take a couple of days to do those before I dive into the Module 3 submissions that you've made. With that in mind, I believe I've already talked with you about that our grades are due on July 14th. The cutoff date to turn in your assignments is July 10th. That gives me time to score assignments. So anything that you haven't turned in yet, please go ahead and get that done. Once I start scoring the Module 3 assignments, I will just continue right on through scoring whatever Module 4 assignments have been turned in. And so you'll want to keep in mind the same thing with the key assessment, which is sort of the anchor assessment for this module. You are to find a scope and sequence regarding a content area if you're in elementary, or a course if you're at the secondary or post-secondary level, the scope and sequence of that course in the past, and then you want to turn that in, and then you also want to turn in one that has been revised and hits all of the benchmarks on the rubric, which include technology, cultural responsiveness, bringing that scope and sequence to a higher standard of curriculum. And I was trying to think, it seems like there's one more item on there. Be sure and look at that rubric though, so that you can be sure that you've covered all of the components and have turned in the original and your revision. So those are the things that you'll be needing to do coming up. I think it's going to be very interesting, especially to read your thoughts on technology with all that has happened. And I think you guys will enjoy reading each other's discussion posts on those as well, and getting some feedback on how you've done things. I still follow the curriculum directors group that meets here in Southwest Missouri, and it's more like mid-Missouri across southern Missouri. The network of people who get together once a month who are in a curriculum director's position, assistant superintendent's position, that type of position in school districts across the southern part of the state. I still join in their meetings. And the last few have been Zoom meetings because, of course, we couldn't meet face to face. But the topics of discussion were all about how this virus has caused such a change in how we're dealing with school, with so much being done through technology, from the planning meetings clear through to the actual instruction with the students. And you know, all of the repercussions and of doing that. How do we make it equitable? What do we do for our students who do not have the bandwidth in the area that they live in to be able to Zoom and stay in real time and not end up with a little circle going around waiting to you know, catch up with what's being said, or trying to relate a response when they don't have a steady bandwidth to be able to do that, or possibly they don't have devices at home, and maybe the district that they're in doesn't have a device for every student. And so there's been some very creative ways of handling that in our part of the state, and I'm sure that that's true throughout the state of Missouri and across the United States. So that's one of the issues that we have to think about when we go to the technological tools to help us to have school. So I hope that you'll take some time to you know, really reflect and think about that, and pick up from one another the experiences that we've had, and sort of you know, learn from one another's I hate to say missteps, let's put it that way, because I know everyone is trying to do things the best they can, but what have we found out? So often, until something goes wrong that we're not expecting, when we're doing something new, we try, we fail, and we fail forward. We learn from those mistakes, and we come up with other ways of dealing with situations. And when we do that, if we can share with one another, sometimes we can help someone else avoid going down that same pathway that we found out didn't work so well. So it's an excellent excellent idea for you all to be sharing and networking about this. So I think that's going to be very interesting. I also am sort of interested, having worked at the district level, and I used to daily visit with our technology director in our district. I'd like to know, you know, what are the technology people that you're interviewing? What are they saying? Because, you know, there's as much as the technology folks, you know, help us with planning curriculum during regular school year, they have had a lot on their shoulders trying to figure out, you know, okay, just how far can we stretch our resources that we have to offer our students with technology, and how can I help the teachers, you know, with maybe some strategies and some tools that they've not used before. So this is really, it's been a surprise. It's been interesting, but it's also been an opportunity for great growth in technology use in teaching, in just in the broadest of terms. So I just think it's sort of neat. I think we've got some things to say and think about and talk about that haven't happened in prior semesters. I'm going to leave that at that. We did have our meeting about a week and a half ago on a Wednesday, where we visited, and some of you zoomed in, asked questions about what was expected in the completing the semester and the remaining assignments. And I think we worked a lot of those out. As I've said from the beginning, if you have questions or concerns, please email me, text me, call me, or we can Zoom or use some other type of video chat if you want to about assignments. I'm happy to work with you and try to make this a good learning experience. And that brings me to the final thing that I wanted to talk with you all about tonight. I've just returned your final literature reviews for the semester for this course. And one of my primary roles, in some sense, it's what I spend a lot of my time on. I know I've told you that I teach statistics in this part of the world when we have seated classes. And I do that a lot. And then I've taught this class in the past, but I serve as a dissertation chair for several students, around 12 students that I'm their chair currently. And then I also serve on a lot of dissertation committees. So I am reading and reviewing, editing, commenting on the dissertation process, the writing process a lot. And one of the things that we try to do is to provide students during the coursework part of their earning their degree, whether it's a specialist or the doctorate. We want to provide you with opportunities to write at an academic level, a scholarly type of work, and give you feedback and edit and help you to understand the writing styles that are expected and the formatting styles that are expected. And we do have, of course, we use the APA 7th edition. I'm hoping that you all each own that book. It is definitely going to be a book that you use all of the time. Even if you're in a class where the writing is maybe not edited and commented on the same way that I have done this, it still behooves you to be checking to make sure that you're following the proper rules, because you will come to the point either in your specialist project, if you're working toward your specialist, or your dissertation, if you're working on your doctorate, that you're going to have to meet those rules that are in the APA 7 manual. And so I recommend that you get a copy of that text and keep it with you all the time. The other document that I would recommend is the EDD handbook, and it is on the Lindenwood website. You can just open the website and in the search bar put EDD handbook, and it will take you to the link and you can see the handbook. There's a writing and style guide in it as well. And so the way I think of it is there are some topics that are a little bit left to interpretation in the APA manual. And so once you have seen what is there, then you want to look at the Lindenwood Style Guide and see if there's any guidance in it that leads you to feel that it's different than what you read in the APA manual. If it is, you want to go with whatever the Lindenwood handbook says. And then beyond that, as you're writing either your specialist project or your dissertation, with the specialist project, you'll have an instructor you're working with, and they may have some additional expectations in your writing that you've not read elsewhere, and you need to make sure that you meet their requirements. With the dissertation, the same thing is true with your committee and your chairperson. So none of your writing is just solely on your own. There is definitely that process of the different iterations of the paper. There is a writing, a reading, a rewriting, rereading, and refining the product to get it just as good as we possibly can before it is considered complete and ready for publication. And so I wanted you all to know that when you're reading these revisions and edits that I send, it's something for most folks that's sort of new to have that much back and forth and that much feedback. These projects that you write for are very big and complex papers. There are a lot of things to consider, and so sometimes it takes quite some time to get everything completely fine-tuned where it needs to be. So I wanted to allow you all to become accustomed to seeing that kind of feedback, to understand how to work in Word to be able to click on that vertical red line that's on the left-hand side of the paper, and then when you do that, you see the editing marks that the reader has put there, what the changes that they've made in your paper. I always recommend to my students that they do that first, look at all of the edits that were made, and look at common things that have been changed in your paper. For example, using pronouns is not recommended by APA, and I understand why. These are lengthy documents that we're reading. We don't want to leave any kind of confusion for the reader. We want to be very clear when we are referring to, oftentimes in writing these papers, we talk about students, teachers, administrators, and if you talked about two of those groups or more in a sentence, and then you go to the next sentence and say they can do this, they can do that, and you're thinking of them where in conversation you would be in context with someone, or by that extra body language and so forth that we have, they could follow you. The person you're having a conversation with could follow which group you were talking to and referring to as they. But that's not always clear in reading, and so it's recommended that you repeat who that is. Instead of saying they, if you meant the students, you would say students, this, this, this. If you meant students and teachers, you would say that. Or if you meant administrators, whatever it is, instead of saying they, you say the noun that describes the group you're speaking about. And that keeps everything very clear. And when I'm working with the dissertation students and we get to a point where they've got 3 chapters written and we're going through and revising and looking, and I just sort of say, I need you to tell me, don't give me pronouns, be very clear. It's like you're taking my face and making me, say, look at this is what I'm saying. You're just so explicit and clear in your wording. And I always say it's because these are big papers to read, and I need somebody to keep drawing my attention back to specifically what's right. Don't leave it for me to try to fill in the blanks, because I may fill them in incorrectly and totally misunderstand your point. So that's why a lot of you may have seen what is it, what is they, what is this. That's where I'm saying don't use those pronouns, it, they, this. Use the actual noun, the actual subject that you're speaking about. Another thing that I noticed on some papers is in the references section. When you have put in a URL or web address at the end of your site or your reference that's in the reference section, do not put a period at the end of that. We just want exactly what the web address or URL is, no period. If you're ending with a publisher, you would put a period. If you're ending with the page numbers of a journal article or something like that, you would put the period, but not after at the end with a URL. So those were a couple of common things that I noticed that need to be watched. I'm going to go back to the pronoun thing for just a minute. And I'm going to relate this to something else. So right now I'm just going to give a little talk about writing. One of the things that we all have a tendency to do is to write as we speak, and we do not speak in scholarly language. I always tell my students, nobody would want to listen to us if we always talked using scholarly language. And so we are very conversational, but that is not the type of writing that we do for these academic scholarly papers. So you want to become used to reading and writing that way. One of the things that we are not supposed to do is to use contractions. So I'm not going to say can't, won't, shouldn't. It will be cannot, will not, should not. It is. The only time that you would put a contraction in is if it's part of a direct quote. And then that's somebody else's writing that you are reporting there. Another thing we don't do in scholarly writing is use, I prefer that we not use pronouns at all, even I, we, they. We write in third person, no second person. So no you, we don't refer to our audience at all. We also don't write I or refer to ourselves as the researcher. We write sentences in such a way that we don't have to refer to ourselves. So those are some of the things that are different in how we write and how we speak. So that's something to become accustomed to. Not using colloquial phraseology or jargon, or we usually will just call it informal language. So those are some of the things that you want to avoid. Another thing to avoid, and this will show up if you use any kind of a writing aid, you will notice when you set the settings on it for scholarly or academic language, the word really, R-E-A-L-L-Y, should never be anywhere in your paper. Very, you're not going to need it. There are some phrases like in order to, it's recommended to change that just to be able to, make that be can. So be concise in your wording. When we talk about using academic and scholarly language, we aren't talking about using stilted language, if that makes sense, like going back to old English words or something like that. That's not necessary. But it just takes some time to refine. And I promised an anecdote to one of you in my response on the literature, either the literature review or critical analysis, that I was going to share in this video. And this comes just from this past week. We had a little meeting at OTC in Springfield. We had sort of a little open house to see if there were any students, or not students, any employees there who were interested in the doctoral program for higher education. And so we had folks just dropping by, and we have some graduates who are there who have received their doctorate, and some who are currently working on their doctorate. And they stopped by just to share their experiences with anyone who might happen to come in. And one of the women who was there, she has her bachelor's in nursing, master's, 2 masters in nursing, and she was commenting about writing for the dissertation and learning that writing style. And she said, I have these degrees. I felt like I was a good writer. And she said, it's been a journey to learn the writing style that's required for dissertation. She said, I've noticed that even in my emails, she said, I reread them. I make sure my spelling is correct. I make sure my grammar is correct. And so it was just sort of funny. She says, even in my emails, my personal emails, my text messages, she said, I've started, looking for those things. So once you go down this journey, it sticks with you, and it feathers out into other places. And I will say this, having worked in the district office, and being one of those people who helped to work with professional development. And quite often in our district, our professional development committee, I was an ad hoc member, and I would sit with them, and then they would come up with their plan for professional development. I could bring them in research and, you know, different things like that to help as they were looking at the needs assessment, determining what was going to happen going forward. And then I also was the person, because I had an office job through the day, and I wasn't in the classroom all day long. I would be the one to call and contact people to come and work with us in our district if we had anyone come from outside to help us with facilitation of whatever it was we were doing in professional development. And one of the things that was very hard for me was if I received information back, a message back, either email, letter, whatever it might be, from someone that we were thinking of bringing into the district to help us if they had misspellings or poor grammar or you know, whatever, even in an email message, but certainly in any kind of professional brochures or anything like that that were sent out. Those kinds of things stuck out, and if they weren't done well, and it gave room for me to feel uncomfortable. And then if we had any kind of pushback at all on going forward from any sector of the group that would be participating in that professional development, if they saw any of that, then that took away the credibility of the person who was coming, possibly, or the organization who might have been providing us professional development. And so my takeaway from that was always that as leaders, as instructional leaders, as educational leaders, we need to be very careful about any writing that we present, whether it's in an assignment for a course that we're taking, in professional development activities that we are participating in, which I was really happy to see how many of you believe that instructional leaders need to continue to be professionally developed. That is very true. Whether it's an email to your staff, letters home to parents, whatever it may be, you want to, as part of your leadership practice, and one of the skills that you want to make sure that you do the very best you can on, is to make sure that spelling, grammar, and language is always appropriate for the audience, but that it's always correct. So I want to just to set that out there for you, because that was a takeaway that I know that was a weakness that we had with one presenter who actually was presenting, and or I shouldn't say presenter, a professional developer who was actually working as more or less like an instructional coach with our teachers on reading, and had very poor writing. And we know those are reciprocal practices, and it really diminished the credibility of that professional developer, because of just quickly doing things and not taking care with her writing. So not that we don't all make mistakes, we do. I know I do. I'm sure you've found some in things that I've done. You've noticed some in even our published curriculum and assignments that are online. And so those things can happen, but believe me, I've got a list. I'm going to be passing forward to the person who has access to edit in our coursework, so that we can get those things cleared up. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you all as well. So once again, please double check. I recommend that you go to Canvas, go to your grade sheet, look and see that you have up through Module 2, at this point, you should have a score for every assignment that is from Module 1 up to Module 2. If you're missing anything, please get that to me as soon as you possibly can, because that means that there's something that's past due that I'm going to need to score, and that'll, like I said, has to be done by July 14th, and July 10th is absolutely the last day that you'll have access to turn those things in. So you'll want to be sure to put that on your list and make time to get those in if you haven't yet. Again, any questions, concerns, be sure and get a hold of me, and I'll be happy to visit with you. I've enjoyed reading and hearing from those of you who I've visited with, and I'm very thankful and proud of this group. I've not had a chance to meet all of you, but I've been impressed with the work you've turned in, and so I just wanted to let you know that. And I'm going to sign off. This will be it for this course. I hope you guys enjoy some time. I hope you have some time between the end of this coursework and the beginning of your school semesters in your districts and with Lindenwood. I believe August 24th is our first day for fall classes. So I hope that I'll get to see you again, and I'll be remembering your names. So I'll be looking for those graduation announcements that we get of who will be graduating coming up. So it'll all be here before you know it. Have a great rest of the summer. Take care and stay healthy.